You're not crazy. That coworker is interrupting you on purpose. That friend does talk down to you. And yes, some people simply don't respect you. But here's the twist. You don't fix disrespect by fighting it. You fix it by mastering one thing: your influence. I want you to imagine a room. In that room are two people. One is loud, critical, maybe even cruel. The other is calm, collected, but powerful. Who do you think wins long term? Today, I'm going to show you how to be that second person, the one who commands respect without demanding it. When someone doesn't respect you, the most common instinct is to fix them, to make them see your worth, to argue, prove, demand, or even beg for the decency you know you deserve. But here's the hard truth. The battle is rarely won there. It begins somewhere else, quieter, deeper, respecting yourself first. Respect isn't just about what people give you. It's also about what you permit. And if you consistently tolerate being spoken over, dismissed, or treated like you don't matter, that tolerance sends a signal. Not just to others, but to yourself. Every time you let someone cross a boundary without consequence, you're teaching them how to treat you. More importantly, you're reinforcing to your own mind that maybe that kind of treatment is acceptable. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout or dominate. It's subtle but unmistakable. It shows up in the way you speak about yourself when no one's listening. It's in the way you carry yourself, how you manage your time, and how you handle being overlooked or insulted. People notice that. Even if they don't comment on it, they feel it. Self-respect shifts the energy in the room. It tells people, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it to you. Now, this doesn't mean you walk around with your chest out and eyes glaring. That's ego, not confidence. True self-respect is calm. It's grounded. It's choosing to speak clearly, not cruelly. It's saying no without needing to justify yourself. It's holding eye contact just long enough to say, I'm here. I see what you're doing. And I'm not shrinking. One of the most misunderstood things about self-respect is that it's not based on achievement, appearance, or popularity. It's not something you earn after you've made it. It's a decision to stop outsourcing your worth. When you base your self-respect on how others treat you, you give them the power to inflate or deflate your value. But when it comes from within, when you decide that your time, voice, and presence matter, you begin to protect those things. Not by building walls, but by building standards. Consider how you treat yourself during your lowest moments. Are you cruel or kind? Do you criticize every flaw, or do you extend the grace you'd offer a friend? Because the way you talk to yourself sets the tone for how others are allowed to talk to you. If you're constantly putting yourself down, others won't think twice about doing the same. But if you speak to yourself with clarity and quiet dignity, even when you're struggling, people sense it. They adjust. Now think about your environment. Do you surround yourself with people who uplift you, or do you tolerate those who subtly undermine you? Do you chase approval from those who give it sparingly, or do you honor your need for mutual respect? This isn't about cutting people off at the first sign of conflict. It's about checking in with yourself, asking, do I feel valued in this space, or do I feel small? And then, having the courage to make changes when the answer isn't good enough. Self-respect also means letting go of the need to be liked by everyone, because the desire to be liked often leads us to betray our own boundaries. We laugh at jokes that sting. We agree to things we don't want. We stay silent when our voice matters. But when self-respect becomes more important than approval, you begin to choose yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. People may not always like someone with high self-respect, but they do take notice. Some may be drawn to it. Others may be intimidated. That's not your problem. Your job isn't to control their reaction. It's to show up in a way that aligns with your values, your worth, and your vision of who you want to be. Because how you see yourself becomes the invitation for how others will see you. And that is where real respect begins. When someone disrespects you, the first reaction that often rises is emotional. Anger, frustration, the sting of being misunderstood, undervalued, or outright insulted can light a fire in your chest. And in that heat, it feels almost natural to lash back. Raise your voice. Shut them down. Get even. But the problem with reacting emotionally is that it often plays directly into the dynamic the other person is counting on. If they're looking to get under your skin, they've just won. If they want control of the conversation, they now have it. When you react, you hand over your power. Responding is different. Responding is a choice. It's slower, quieter, but infinitely stronger. It comes from intention, not impulse. And it starts with a pause. That tiny space between what was said to you and what you decide to do next is where your power lives. You don't have to use it to retaliate. You can use it to redirect, to ask a question, to change the tempo of the interaction entirely. Let's say someone talks down to you in front of others. Maybe at work, maybe in a social group. The instinct might be to throw their words back at them, to assert yourself by matching their volume or tone. But that instinct often leads to escalation. Instead, imagine taking a breath, standing your ground, and saying, "Interesting. Can you explain what you mean by that?" Not sarcastically, not aggressively, just plainly. That question does more than deflect the disrespect. It puts the responsibility back on the person to clarify themselves. And often, once they're asked to explain their rudeness out loud, the tension shifts. Because many people don't actually want to be held accountable for their behavior. They thrive on others backing down or blowing up. But when you stay centered, you interrupt that cycle. Responding also means choosing your battles. Not everything deserves your energy. Sometimes disrespect is so subtle, an eye roll, a condescending comment, a passive-aggressive jab, that calling it out might escalate the situation or make you look overly sensitive. In these moments, responding doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means mentally noting the pattern and adjusting your relationship with that person over time. You don't have to confront every slight to maintain your dignity. You can respond by investing less attention, offering fewer details about your life, or simply disengaging when their behavior turns toxic. That too is a response. Quiet, clear, and powerful. A calm response is not a sign of weakness. It's emotional intelligence in motion. It's recognizing that you don't need to convince someone to treat you well. You need to uphold your own standards, and that means deciding what's worth engaging in and what isn't. People often confuse dominance with strength, but strength is staying composed when you're provoked. Strength is knowing that just because someone throws a jab doesn't mean you have to swing back. Think of it like this: reacting is about them. Responding is about you. A reaction means they've pulled you into their world, into their rhythm. A response means you're staying in your own frame, operating on your terms. Even if you choose to walk away, stay silent, or set a firm boundary later, it's still your move. Responding also gives you the upper hand in the long run. Over time, people learn that you're not easily manipulated, not quick to crumble or explode. That changes how they engage with you. Some may test you more, but others will begin to respect the steadiness you bring into the room. It's like being a thermostat instead of a thermometer. You set the tone. You regulate the heat. You don't rise and fall with every spike in temperature around you. This kind of control isn't about denying your emotions. It's about mastering them. You can feel disrespected without becoming disrespectful. You can be hurt without becoming reactive. And when you respond rather than react, you show people something they're not used to seeing. Someone who leads themselves. Someone who doesn't beg for respect, but earns it through calm, unwavering presence. One of the most overlooked ways to handle people who don't respect you is also one of the most subtle. Ask questions. It sounds too simple to be effective, but in reality, it's one of the sharpest tools you can use in conversations where tension, ego, or passive aggression is present. Disrespect often wears a disguise. It shows up as sarcasm, condescension, dismissiveness, or thinly veiled jokes. What lies underneath that behavior is rarely confidence. More often, it's insecurity, fear, or a desire to control. When you respond to that with questions, not accusations or counterattacks, you break the expected pattern. People who behave with disrespect usually expect one of two things: silence or a fight. If you stay silent, you signal passivity. If you lash out, you look unstable or emotional. But if you respond with a clear, direct question, you take the air out of their performance. Questions force people to engage their thinking brain instead of staying in attack mode. It becomes much harder for them to stay on the offensive when they're being asked to explain or clarify themselves. Imagine someone at work undermines you during a meeting. Instead of getting defensive or returning the slight, you say, "Could you walk me through your thinking on that?" Or maybe, "I want to make sure I understand. Are you saying this approach won't work, or are you suggesting a different one?" That kind of question doesn't just buy you time to stay calm, it also turns the spotlight away from you and onto them. Now they have to clarify their tone, their meaning, and their intent. In many cases, people backtrack or soften their words when faced with the responsibility of explaining them. Another example: someone makes a joke at your expense in a group setting. It's meant to be funny, but it stings. You could brush it off, get angry, or you could simply say, "What made you say that?" That question is disarming. It puts the weight back on the person who threw the punchline to think about why they did it. It doesn't escalate the moment, but it makes everyone aware that something crossed a line, even if you never explicitly say so. A question can do what confrontation sometimes can't: shift awareness without creating a scene. The power in asking questions also lies in the fact that it gives you control without looking controlling. You're not shutting the other person down. You're inviting them to expand. And in that expansion, they either reveal their motives or begin to feel the discomfort of their own behavior. You're not being combative. You're being curious, but not passively. You're using curiosity as a form of leadership, as a way to guide the energy of the conversation toward truth and away from drama. Questions also help you stay in alignment with your own values. It's easy to get pulled into someone else's negativity or disrespectful tone. But when you ask a question, you stay grounded. You stay in learning mode. Even if you already know the answer, even if their disrespect is obvious, the act of asking keeps you centered in strength, not spite. You're not here to win an argument. You're here to protect your clarity and self-respect. This technique is not about being clever or manipulative. It's about being intentional. Instead of playing the same game they are, you change the rules. You refuse to respond on their level. You raise the level of the conversation without saying, "I'm above this." You show it. And when you consistently show that you won't be baited, belittled, or bulldozed, people start to realize that disrespect won't get the reaction they want. Sometimes, a simple question asked calmly in the middle of tension is more powerful than any clever comeback. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be intentional. You don't have to match their energy. You get to hold your own. And when you ask the right question at the right moment, the conversation and the power starts to shift. Stick with me for the next few minutes, and you'll leave with 3 ways to handle disrespect that are so subtle, they'll think you've done nothing, but everything will have changed. Setting boundaries with people who don't respect you isn't about being cold, harsh, or cutting people off at the first sign of tension. It's about protecting your emotional, mental, and even physical space with clarity and calm. Many people think boundaries have to be loud or dramatic to work, but in truth, the most effective ones are quiet, firm, and consistent. They don't need to punish, they need to communicate. When someone disrespects you, what they're really doing is testing the limits of what they can get away with. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's habitual. Either way, if you don't define the edge, they'll keep pushing. And over time, those small breaches, interrupting you, mocking your choices, speaking over you, dismissing your needs, become normalized. You end up feeling small, drained, or angry without knowing exactly why. That's what life without boundaries feels like. You're constantly reacting, constantly adjusting yourself to fit someone else's behavior. Boundaries change that dynamic. They give shape to your self-respect. They signal, without hostility, what you will and will not accept. But here's the key. Boundaries are not demands. They're not about changing someone else. They're about deciding what you will do if certain behaviors continue. That shift in mindset is critical. You're not trying to control anyone. You're controlling your own participation in the dynamic. Let's say someone repeatedly interrupts you during conversations. You could let it slide, hoping it stops. You could explode after the 10th time. Or you could calmly say, "I want to share my thoughts too. Let me finish this point." The first time you say it, they might be surprised, maybe even annoyed. That's okay. Boundaries are often met with resistance, especially from people who benefited from you not having any. But your job isn't to convince them your boundary is fair. Your job is to hold it, calmly and consistently, until it becomes the new standard. Another example. You have a friend or family member who constantly gives unsolicited advice, especially in ways that feel critical or condescending. Instead of arguing every time, you might say, "I appreciate you trying to help, but I'm not looking for advice right now." If they keep doing it, you repeat yourself without extra emotion. Over time, that repetition becomes a boundary in itself. It teaches the other person what's acceptable, and it teaches you that you don't have to over-explain or justify your limits. Boundaries also apply to time and access. If someone constantly messages you late at night or expects you to drop everything for them, setting a boundary might look like responding the next day instead of immediately. You don't need a long apology or excuse. Your behavior becomes your message. You're showing them, gently but clearly, what your priorities are. The hardest part about boundaries is not setting them, it's sticking to them. It's holding the line when it's uncomfortable, when someone guilt-trips you, or when they try to twist your words to make you feel unreasonable. That's where many people fold. They think, maybe I'm being too sensitive, or I don't want to seem difficult. But boundaries are not about being liked. They're about being respected. And if someone respects you less because you've clearly communicated a need, that tells you something important about the relationship. Holding boundaries doesn't mean you don't care about people. It means you care about yourself enough to choose what kind of interactions you're willing to engage in. It's not rejection. It's clarity. It's saying, "This is where I end and you begin." And when you begin to live from that place of quiet self-protection, not out of fear or defense, but out of confidence, everything shifts. The people who truly respect you will adjust. The ones who don't will reveal themselves quickly. Either way, you're no longer negotiating your peace. You're honoring it. And that's the real power of setting boundaries calmly and clearly. When someone disrespects you, the knee-jerk response is often rooted in ego. You feel the need to assert yourself, to correct them, to make sure they know they crossed a line. This urge is deeply human. It's the ego trying to defend its territory. But ego, for all its fire, rarely helps in these moments. It wants to win, not resolve. And when two egos clash, the result is usually more conflict, not less. The better route, the more effective one, is empathy. Not weakness, not submission, but quiet understanding of what's really going on beneath the surface. Empathy doesn't mean excusing bad behavior or tolerating disrespect. It means seeing past the surface of someone's actions to the fear, insecurity, or confusion that might be driving it. Because here's the truth. Most people who act with disrespect are not operating from a place of power. They're reacting from a place of pain or fear. Someone who constantly tries to make others feel small is usually trying to protect something fragile inside themselves. Their disrespect might be a defense mechanism, a habit formed by years of not feeling in control, or a way to mask their own sense of inadequacy. When you approach someone like that with empathy, you step outside of their emotional grip. You're not validating their behavior. You're simply refusing to be pulled into the emotional trap they're trying to set. Empathy allows you to observe instead of absorb. You can say to yourself, "This isn't about me," and act from that understanding. That changes everything. You begin to respond with clarity instead of retaliation, with calm instead of chaos. And ironically, it's in that moment of empathy, not defensiveness, that you regain your power. Let's say someone lashes out at you in a meeting, undermines your work, or speaks to you with an aggressive tone. Your ego might say, "Show them they can't talk to you like that." But empathy asks, what are they actually reacting to? You don't have to say that out loud. You don't have to excuse it. But when you ask it internally, you change your posture. You might respond with a simple, steady voice instead of a raised one. You might pause, give them space to vent, and then redirect the conversation to facts instead of emotions. This doesn't just de-escalate the situation, it shifts the balance of respect. The hardest part about using empathy in moments of disrespect is that it requires a level of self-security that most people aren't used to accessing. It requires you to stay grounded in your identity, even when someone is trying to shake it. But the more you practice this, the more it becomes natural. You start to develop an inner strength that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And people notice. They may not always respond kindly, but they register the shift. You're not playing the same game anymore. You're not biting every bait or flinching at every jab. Empathy also opens the door to better communication. When someone sees that you're not attacking them back, they're more likely to soften, even if only slightly. They may not admit fault, but they may pause long enough for a real conversation to begin. It's in that pause that respect starts to grow. Because now, instead of reacting from wounded pride, you're leading with self-respect and emotional maturity. That sets the tone. That changes the temperature of the room. It's important to remember that empathy is not agreement. You can understand where someone's behavior comes from and still decide that it's unacceptable. You can hold space for someone's struggle without sacrificing your standards. That balance, seeing others clearly without letting them distort you, is where true power lives. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention, but it transforms every interaction. You stop fighting for respect and start commanding it, not through force, but through presence. And that's something the ego could never do on its own. When dealing with people who don't respect you, one of the strongest, most underestimated choices you can make is to simply walk away. Not in anger, not in dramatic protest, but in quiet, deliberate action. Walking away is not about giving up. It's about deciding what you're no longer available for. It's a declaration that your time, energy, and presence are valuable, and you refuse to spend them where they're not honored. Many people stay in situations, conversations, or relationships long past the point where they feel respected. They hope it will get better. They convince themselves that being patient is a virtue. They tell themselves, maybe if I just explain myself one more time, they'll get it. But over-explaining is often a sign that you're trying to earn respect from someone who has no intention of offering it. And that effort becomes exhausting. You begin shrinking. You start second-guessing your instincts. You tolerate things that slowly chip away at your sense of self. Choosing to walk away interrupts that cycle. It doesn't always mean physically leaving a room. Sometimes it means emotionally detaching. Sometimes it means stepping back from the conversation. Sometimes it means ending a relationship, cutting off constant access, or choosing not to reply. It's not about punishing the other person. It's about protecting yourself. And it's hard, not because you don't know it's right, but because walking away feels like letting go of the hope that things will change. That's the painful part. But what's on the other side is your freedom. Walking away becomes easier when you start trusting yourself. You don't need 100 reasons to justify it. You just need to feel the shift inside you. That moment when a comment cuts too deep, when the same pattern repeats for the 10th time, when the weight of the interaction no longer matches your peace. That's your signal. That's the part of you that remembers who you are, even when someone else keeps trying to forget. It's easy to confuse endurance with strength. We're taught that staying is brave, that sticking it out is admirable. But there's a different kind of courage in knowing when enough is enough. In a world that rewards constant availability and infinite tolerance, choosing to walk away without guilt is a powerful rebellion. It tells the world, I don't need to be mistreated to prove I'm kind. I don't need to be drained to be loyal. I don't need to be walked on to keep the peace. There's a misconception that walking away means you've lost, or that you're weak. But what it really means is that you've decided the fight isn't worth your energy anymore. It means you've recognized that some people don't deserve a front row seat in your life. It's not personal, it's strategic. You're choosing to put your energy where it can grow, not where it's constantly being chipped away. Sometimes, when you walk away, the other person might react with confusion, anger, or even manipulation. They might try to guilt you into staying. They might suddenly offer the respect they withheld for so long. But your job in that moment is to remember the pattern. Don't trade long-term peace for temporary validation. If someone only starts treating you better when you're halfway out the door, that's not respect. It's fear of losing control. Walking away also makes space for better conversations, better environments, better people. It's a filter. It clears out the noise. And in that quiet, you get to rebuild your boundaries, your standards, your confidence. You're no longer surviving in someone else's world. You're choosing your own. That kind of choice rewrites your story. You become someone who knows what they deserve and doesn't need to beg for it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just movement. Just distance. Just silence. Not because you're defeated, but because you've outgrown the conversation. That's not walking away in weakness. That's walking away with your dignity intact. And not everyone needs to understand your decision. They weren't the ones losing sleep. You were. Now you're choosing something different. Something better. You. So here's the truth. How people treat you is a reflection of them, but how you respond is a reflection of you. You don't have to raise your voice to raise your value. You don't need to react to every jab, chase every insult, or tolerate what drains you. You can stand your ground with calm. You can ask questions that shift the room. You can set clear boundaries without rage. You can lead with empathy without losing your edge. And when necessary, you can walk away, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you model. And the more you live with clarity, the more the right people will match your energy, and the wrong ones will fall away. In the end, it's not about handling people who don't respect you. It's about becoming someone who no longer entertains what diminishes you. That's where your real power lives, not in reaction, but in restraint, intention, and self-respect.